Since the early settlement of Australia in 1788, the clearing of masses and amounts of land for agriculture cleared for livestock and plantations by the European settlers have greatly impacted the biodiversity of mainland Australia, causing native species to become extinct over the centuries, but now the forests of Tasmania are under threat. For over 3 decades, Tasmania has been an epicentre of environmental conflict against logging companies and other companies that would cause damage to the environment. During the 1980s and 1990s, the Commonwealth Government planned to establish a World Heritage Area in the southwest of the state, which led to forest-related disputes with the Wesley Vale pulp mill that wished to clear cut native forests for wood chip production within that area for export overseas. This led to the signing of the regional forest agreements, focusing on the forestry reserves that was adequate, comprehensive and reprehensive to our biodiversity perspective, which was later undermined due to insufficient date and bureaucratic meddling. The Bell Bay Pulp Mill, owned by Gunn Limited, the state's largest forest company, was to be built in the state's northwest area, was approved by the government in October 2007, against the opposition from the state-wide public community. Now the newly elected Liberal government has asked the World Heritage Committee to delist 74,000 hectares, which the previously elected government agreed to the signing of Tasmanian peace deal of 170,000 hectares of forest to be added to the World Heritage Area. The Liberals state that Australia has too many locked up forests and will be setting up a new advisory council to support the timber industries. The Liberal government doesn't support further lockups to our forests, stating that Australia has quite enough national parks already, which has angered conservationists and the Greens by backing out of the deal.
We don't support, as a government and as a coalition, further lockups of our forests. We just don't support it. We have quite enough national parks, we have quite enough locked up forests already. In fact, in an important respect, we have too much locked up forest. Now, I'm all in favour of protecting pristine wilderness in proportion. I am all in favour of that. But why should we lock up as some kind of World Heritage sanctuary country which has been logged, degraded or planted for timber? Why should we do that? And frankly, when this government comes across examples of actions which are contrary to common sense, we do our best to reverse them.
Liberal Senator Richard states that the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organisation, UNESCO, has misled the government about the agreed areas on having any heritage value because of the areas have had large amounts of forests that have been logged for over long periods of time and doesn't meet the definition of being a wilderness in any way or form. So that it's nothing more than a land grab on valuable forest resource areas, and shutting down the forest industry in Tasmania, believing that this new evidence could make a strong case to allow them to delist 74,000 hectares from the original agreement. Environment Tasmania's Phil Pullinger claims that the area is not untouched wilderness, and log-in within the 170,000 hectares was taken into account when the area was assessed and was deemed that they should be included, as only small areas within the large area was still intact wilderness. The areas listed to be included are the Florentine, the Sticks, Great Western Tiers and Southern Forests. The battle to preserve the forest of Tasmania has been going on for decades, and only till recently there was a glimmer of hope that the war would come to an end, with the signing of the Tasmanian peace deal that was passed in the state parliament on 30th of April 2013, with the support of the Greens and Labor while being opposed by the Liberal Party. The battle over the building of the Wesley Vale pulp mill in the 1990s was the first great win for the environmentalists against large forestry industries catching the government at the time by surprise, who treated the environmentalists as promotional interest groups, keeping them out of the decision-making process on land use debates. The main worry of the building of the pulp mill was the pollution problems it will make in the surrounding areas of the production site, making many Australians aware of the dangers of chlorine and dioxin, urging people to purchase chlorine-free paper products. Also, environmentalists raised awareness on the mill's logging of native forests. This caused many Australian paper and timber industries to invest in exporting of wood chips and manufacturing capacity overseas rather than in Australia. Projects that adapted to environmental improvements proceeded in production using recycled paper as a fibre source. The main problem of logging native forests is its impact to the biodiversity of native species that rely on it for survival. A good example of a species greatly affected by logging is the Tasmanian wedge-tailed eagle. The species requires nesting eucalypt trees to be older than 150 years of age, while the current harvesting rotation of native forests is 80 years too short for the development of nesting habitat within the nest centre and surrounding resource reserves. The only native animals affected by logging of native forests. There are many more that are affected, like sugar gliders, owls, pygmy possums, bats and swift parrots that rely on the holes and hollows that only form in old trees, which are the most valuable resource for the timber industries. Recent conflict is with the Australian lumber giant, Guns Limited and Forestry Tasmania, holding a monopoly over Tasmania's logging industry. They have been clear-cutting native forests and killing thousands of native wildlife on private property using 1,080 poisons, which in turn affect the predator species of Tasmania like the Tasmanian devil and wedge-tailed eagle that eat the poisoned prey. Guns Limited exports about 80% of their wood chips to Japan and made into paper products. The company exports around 7.7 million tonnes of wood chips to Japan. The Guns Limited 2005 annual report showed a $544 million from total revenue from forest products was made. This makes Japan the primary consumer for company and the fueling of the logging of the Tasmanian forests. The downside of the improved conservation restrictions by the consent pressure from the environmentalists has had a negative impact on the local industries of Tasmania. Since the Wesley Vale pulp mill proposal was declined in 1990, many companies decided to shut down due to the high level of environmental restrictions and complaints against using chlorine-filled paper by the environmentalists, forcing the companies to bleach the paper to make it chlorine-free. This made it too costly to produce adequate profit from their production at the end of the year, as most of their gain would be used to maintain the environmental restrictions placed on them. If the Liberal government is successful in removing the 70,000 hectares from the World Heritage Agreement, the Guns Limited company will have a chance to cut down the old-growth trees to turn into wood chips. The question is, do we as Australians wish to see our forests chopped down to become wood chips and exported to foreign countries just to be sent back to us as paper?